With that, give to you Governor Steve Bullock. Governor, great to have you. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to be here. Boy, between the sheriff and Kimberly and Stephanie, I'm almost in a lot of trouble following all this. But it's great to be here tonight. And it is, people talk about, the Polk County steak fry. To hell with that. It's the Story County Democrats the next night that are that much greater. And the last time I was in Nevada was probably about a month and a half ago. Councilman Luke Spence gave me a tour around. Even a little bit before that. The first time I came was long before I got into this, it was, probably sometime early April, May 2018, and had a great lunch with Senator Kornbach, others, and everybody said, well, if you're ever gonna learn anything about Iowa, you have to meet this woman named Jan Bauer. And I was a little nervous, but she's been teaching me all the way along. So, Jan, appreciate both your warm welcome always here in Ames, and also your endorsement, for sure. Great. Look, about this time of year, you get people from all over the country, and they visit you, and they try to make some attenuated connection to Iowa. So I'm not going to tell you that my great-great-grandparents settled in Henry County in 1850. They did. Not going to tell you that my mom was born in Ottumwa. Yeah, she was. Because that's not why we gather, right? We gather for the sake of our country, standing in this world, for the sake of what we're going to pass on that next generation. We gather to make sure that Donald Trump is a one-term president. It is not the only reason, though. It's more than just beating him. At this point, it is soundly rejecting this behavior that he is normalizing. The lies and the misstatements, the abuse of power, the dividedness by race, by gender, by nationality, by geography. The behavior where we now expect more out of our preschoolers than we do the President of the United States. And it's more than about just beating him. It's about offering something better. It's about soundly rejecting and getting back, though, to things like decency. Bringing people together, showing that government can actually work for the people, showing that everybody, wherever they are, has a fair shot at a better life. Because when we as Democrats win, when you win in Story County, when we win everywhere, it's about offering something better. It's about showing up. It's about listening. It's giving people a reason to vote for us, not just against him. That's how we win. That's how we always have won every single time. Look, this is my background a little bit. Raised in Montana, single-parent household, paycheck to paycheck. Only knew that there's a governor's house in town because I delivered newspapers to it as a kid. So I've made it literally 4 blocks in life from where I was raised. But I worked my way through college and I borrowed my way through law school. I'll never forget that day that my wife and I paid off what would be $175,000 in today's terms of my student debt. Yeah, it impacted what I could do along the way for sure. But when I was a boy, 90% of 30-year-olds were doing better than their parents were at age 30. Today, it's half. 60% of Americans haven't had a pay increase in real terms in 40 years. In 2/3 of the counties in this country, they've actually lost businesses. And folks saying, I shouldn't have to leave my school or my church or my community just to make a decent living. Growing up and delivering newspapers to the governor's house to now living in it, I actually had the opportunity to live that American dream. But we have to recognize for far too many people in this country, for far too many in communities of color, that dream's been denied. For women who are still making, if it only was 85 cents on the dollar, it's about 80 cents on the dollar. Or millennials struggling with this college debt, that dream has been deferred. Or if you think about immigrants, that dream has now been derailed. And for shopkeepers, farmers, factory workers, high school graduates only, that American dream's been destroyed. So this has to be about beating Donald Trump, but it also has to be about making sure the economy in Washington, D.C. can start working for people again so they believe that things could be better. But first things first, I am going to be a single issue voter this election. And that single issue is making sure that we can beat Donald Trump. In 2016, I was the only Democrat in the country to get reelected in a state where Donald Trump won. Trump took Montana by 20 points, I won by 4. 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump. At the end of the day, this isn't part about math. It's about collecting 270 electoral votes. And we got to recognize the path to victory, it doesn't just go through the coasts. It doesn't just go through the urban areas. It goes through places that we lost in 2016. Think about it, you've done real well in Story County, but almost a third of your counties voted Obama, Obama, Trump. This election is about not only the White House, it's about the State House. Because the deep, dark secret we never tell you, we come and we love you to death until February, and then we leave. And you're still stuck right now with a legislature that privatized your Medicaid system and is destroying it all across. It's stripping away rights of teachers, of workers, of women. We need to make sure that we have somebody at the top of the ticket that will help all throughout. And I do believe that I'm the best candidate to do that, to take our message to all parts of the country. I refuse to cede basically the votes of rural Americans as if people who actually wake up early, work the land, feed the world, pass the plate on a Sunday are forever somehow wedded to a lying con man from New York with orange hair and a gold toilet. These are voters that will come back to us. And I know we all make big promises. You should be skeptical about that too, but here's a promise I'll make. What's today? Today is the 22nd. Write this down. If I'm the nominee, I'm going to win California, Massachusetts, Vermont, a whole lot of those states. But we have to ask those same folks if they can win Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, because that's how we win. I'm a pro-choice, pro-union, populist Democrat that won 3 elections in a red state, not by compromising our values, but by getting stuff done. And at the core of that word progressive is actually making progress in people's lives, making a difference. As a governor would stack up the way that I've been able to do that when you actually provide health care, education funding, kicking dark money, protecting civil liberties against anybody in this field. Because I fear at times that Washington has become a place where talking's become the substitute for doing. One of the reasons why we're not always competing everywhere is people want to believe the government can work for them, that can address the challenges that are here and now. Look, my legislature is more Republican than yours in Iowa. No, that wasn't a joke. But even with that Republican legislature, we've been able to expand health care and have mental health and physical health parity. We've actually made record investments in our K-12 system, and our teachers can still organize and collectively bargain. We've kicked dark money out of our elections. We have the 4th lowest tuition and fees in the nation by actually investing in our colleges and freezing college tuition for our students. Been able to do that by I try to find common ground, but that doesn't mean we have to compromise our values. I have more vetoes than any governor in the history of Montana. Vetoed every attack on a woman's right to make her own health care decisions, because that should be your decisions, not mine. 25 states have actually made it harder to vote in the last 2 years. We protected access to the ballot box. We've protected access to the courthouse for injured workers. Thank you. We've kept our public lands in public hands and stopped every effort to roll back renewable efforts. And as a former union side labor lawyer before I got into all of this, Montana is still a state where you can organize and collectively bargain for better wages and better working conditions. How I've won and how I've governed are much the same. I'll never forget when we were trying to get Medicaid expansion passed the first time. That was in 2015. This was kind of the heart of the anti-Obamacare time. Went to this town called Choteau, Montana, and Choteau is about 1,700 people on the Rocky Mountain front. Literally everybody in town knew I was coming for a community meeting because the Koch brothers were kind enough to mail everyone these big glossy pictures with Barack Obama and Steve Bullock. Our cheeks were touching. We said, Obama and Bullock are coming to your community to destroy your health care system. But I showed up anyway. And instead of just telling them what they need, actually listened. First guy that got up was hospital administrator. He said, we're in a small town. 43% of the people who walk through these hospital doors don't have health insurance. A couple folks got up afterwards and, they might have called me a socialist or me and Obama are going to destroy America. But probably he's the fifth speaker. He was what your county supervisors are. He was the chair of their county commission. He was a little bit older rancher. He wasn't even from Shodo. He was from this town called Bynum. It's population 50, kind of a suburb of Shodo. But he got up and he goes, I was born in this hospital. This hospital saved my life 2 years ago when I had a heart attack. Folks, if we lose this hospital, this town's gone. Instead of me telling them what they needed, by actually listening, that's what gave that Republican legislator the courage to defy the Koch brothers, defy party leadership, and vote when every single vote mattered. We need to begin from a base assumption that most people's lives are too frantic to care about politics. They're worried about, am I going to lose my job? Is my kid going to get sick? But the values that we hold are the same. You want a safe community. You want a roof over your head. You want a decent job. You want good public schools, not charter schools, not privatized schools. You want good clean air and clean water. And you want the belief you can do better for that next generation than you even did before. Those are the values that Democrats have always fought for. And those are the values that we can win on along the way, as long as we can hit those values to every part of this country. I think D.C. could learn a little bit from Montana. I know you think, Montana, it's just some small populated state somewhere, a little larger population than states like Delaware or Vermont. I'm just saying. In some respects, I'm the only governor left in this race. And some would say, well, boy, you got in too late. And it was about 4 months ago that I got in. And why I didn't get in until then was I have a legislature that meets 90 days every 2 years. We got that Medicaid through in 2015, tried to get it reauthorized by ballot initiative in 2018. Tobacco companies spent literally $26 million killing that reauthorization. So I had a job to do. I could either chase $1 donors or I could save health care for 100,000 people. I chose to do my job. Signed my last bill. Signed my last bill on a Monday. I announced on Tuesday, and I'll be danged if by Thursday I wasn't here in Iowa. And I think that, and I think the DNC's rules of people are spending like $50 and $60 to get a $1 donor online. I think the intent was well, but it's a sad state of affair if the National Party looks like it's more important to be talking to donors or saving donors than at the end of the day, saving people's lives. Because that's not how you lead. That's not how we win the elections, and that's also not how you make a difference in people's lives. As I said, I think D.C. could learn something from Montana. It's not going to be easy, and until we address what's holding us back in so many ways, and that's the corrupting influence of money in this system, everything else Democrats are talking about are going to be that much harder. Think about it. Lindsey Graham literally said we got to get this tax cut through to make our donors happy. Same time, 44% of Americans would have $400 in their pocket in case their car broke down or they face a medical emergency. We pay more for prescription drugs than any other country in the world. Yet it is still, Costco can negotiate prescription drug prices, but it's illegal for the federal government to do it. Generational workers have been replaced by independent contractors. Same point, union membership's half of what it was in the 1980s. Oil companies are making record profits. And the Republican Party is literally the only political party in the world now that does acknowledge that climate change is real. So unless we're going to address the corrupting influence of money in the system for all of these issues, it's going to be that much harder to get anything done. I think we can do it. I've seen it done before. I was Attorney General with your AG, Tom Miller, and it's great to have Tom's support in this as well. At the same time that this little case called Citizens United came down. Citizens United equates corporations with people and money with speech. And if you remember when that decision came down, every state in the country said there's nothing we can do. Democrats actually controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency, and we talked about it. We decried it. We gave speeches about it. We raised money off of it, but didn't do a dang thing. Montana has this dark history of around the turn of the century, these wealthy copper barons. We call them copper kings. They control literally every local, state, and federal election, to the point that folks knew about even beyond Montana. Mark Twain talked about one of them. He said, William Clark, he buys politicians like most of us buy food. Corruption no longer has an offensive smell in Montana. Early 1900s, the newspaper said the greatest living issue confronting us today is whether a corporation shall control the people or the people shall control the corporations. Finally, regular Montanans said, enough's enough. They passed this act called the Corrupt Practices Act in 1912. It made it so corporations couldn't spend or contribute in our elections. And I'll be darned if elections didn't become about this, because we also have some of the lowest contribution limits in the country, which is great for representative democracy. It kind of sucks if you run for president, but that's a whole nother issue. But elections became about this, people actually talking to people. So when Citizens United decision came down, I knew I had to do something. As Attorney General, I took the first case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court after that. And this time we built a record. I had former statewide Republican office holders saying just the threat of all this spending could corrupt what happens at our state houses. I was so excited we were going to change the world. 5-4 decision, 100 years of Montana law was thrown out. Taught me two things. One, don't ever doubt what one justice can do when it comes to our democracy, our workers' rights, our women's rights, our environmental protections. And two, for something so important, you still got to find a way. So I went back to my legislature, which was about 2/3 Republican at that time. We passed a law that said 90 days out from an election, I don't care if you call yourself Americans for America, whatever it is. If you're going to spend it in your elections, you actually have to disclose every dollar that you spend. Never forget, I'm running for re-election in 2016. Americans for Prosperity, that group funded by the Koch brothers. About 93 days out, they did such a good mailing in Montana. It was so well targeted, it even showed up at the governor's house. And my 3 kids are looking at it. And they're like, are you really that much of a creep, Dad? But then on day 90, it stopped. All of that stopped. And if we can kick the Koch brothers out of Montana, we ought to be able to do it here in Iowa. We ought to be able to do it everywhere in this country. So we need legislative action, but we don't even have to rely on just legislative action. I also did this executive order in Montana that said, I can't tell you corporations you can't spend in our elections. But if you want to contract with the state of Montana, you have to disclose every dollar that you're either contributing or spending to impact those elections. Think about if the federal government did that. They contract with dang near every company in this country and world. If elected officials are going to be kind of like NASCAR, sponsored by all kinds of different companies, at least we ought to know who's doing the sponsoring. This is the most important election of my lifetime. How many times have you heard people run for office say that? But it is. Because it's not just about beating Donald Trump. It's about preserving a 243-year experiment called representative democracy. It's about making sure, and I met your Councilman Spence, it was, a month ago or so, taking a tour. It's about making sure that people can move back to communities and know that you have a viable opportunity to live that American dream. It's about making sure that the American dream still exists for people. Look, we got big challenges in this country. Remember how united in the days after 9/11 people felt. We need that same purpose and that compassion and that unity to bridge some of these deep divisions, to actually make us understand that we share more in common than what separates us, and to address what's the big challenge to get everything else going, and that really is to know that you do have a fair shot at the American dream. In 16 weeks in this, I've been here, this is my 12th trip, I think, my 70th stop, and I think I've learned something about Iowans. And I know a lot of people come and say, oh, I didn't understand Iowa. I'll never say that. But what I've learned is Iowa nice. And Iowa nice is that you guys don't take this obligation of being the first in the country as something that you're just given. You take it seriously. You know that you have a role that is so important, not just for our state houses, not just for the Democratic Party, but indeed the entire country. And Iowa nice is, well, you're somewhere on my list. Well, is your list 37 or is it 4 or 5? I ask you, with 134 days more before anybody actually exercised a preference, I ask you to take a close look. I think I'm somebody that, I ask you to join Jan Bauer, join Tom Miller, join others, because I think I'm someone that can not only win this election, but beat Donald Trump. And not only beat Donald Trump, but make it so that you all can help take back your state houses. And you can take back that last official in Story County. Who we have at the top of the ballot matters quite a bit along the way. You're the ones that get to decide this, not national debate stages, nothing else. You're the one that's entrusted with it. So please do take a look. I appreciate you having me. I don't know if you want me to take any more time, Sheriff, or just shut up, because I would be willing to answer any questions. But you're the guy with the gun. I will answer almost any question, just not yours. Just kidding. Sir. So I don't, well, first of all, so the question was, how do you tackle Trump? And one, we have to get some of their voters back. I mean, I actually got about a quarter of their voters. But I think you can't make it all about Trump. I think in part what you do is you call out his behavior, but you make it about the voters. Here's a perfect example. Remember, and it's so crazy because like every week something more crazy comes out of this White House, right? But remember, it was a handful of months ago when he said 4 horrible things about, or he said many horrible things about 4 duly elected members of Congress. Yes. And then he sat there for 12 seconds during that rally, listened to people screaming, send her back, send her back. Well, for the next 2.5 weeks, the national media, everybody talked about, wasn't that horrible? Guess what? It was horrible. But at the same time everybody was talking about that, he was in federal court trying to strip away pre-existing coverage condition from everyone in this country, completely take away Obamacare. Betsy DeVos was out there trying to privatize public education with the Freedom Scholarships. It was about the same time they appointed somebody to the Bureau of Land Management that has spent his whole career trying to transfer federal lands. So I think how you beat him is, first of all, how you treat an adolescent. You call him out on his behavior. You say that's unacceptable for this country, but you don't focus on it every day. You focus on what's happening to people's everyday lives and saying both what he has done. Like, if we're going to be honest, right? Wage growth, job growth has actually been slower under Trump than it was under Obama. What's gone up? Well, our deficit's gone up. Number of uninsured's gone up. Hate crimes have gone up. Bankruptcies of farms have gone up. So let's actually point out what this man has done for this country in that respect and what it's done to people that are every day struggling. Because he said they'd have their back, and he didn't. He said that he'd drain the swamp. It's swampier today than ever before. You can do this over the next 1.5 years without making it all about Donald Trump, but actually making it more about the voters. The people that I work with, they weren't cheering. They were saying, wrap it up, Bullock. I'll close with one last short story. When I got elected in 2012 and moved in the governor's residence, my kids were at the time 6, 8, and 10. It had been the youngest in 40 years in Montana as far as the governor's family. And I'll never forget, we move in the governor's residence. My 6-year-old son, Cameron, he kicks a soccer ball. It bounces off this painting. Somebody says that painting's worth $250,000. I'm like, take down all the paintings, right? Because we have to live here. But my first State of the State address, so my first time that I was going to speak to all the members of our legislature, And it was deeply divided at that time, and it was 2/3 Republican. I said, you're going to hear different noises from the governor's house and my governor's office, and that's the sound of young kids. And we as elected leaders, we have to recognize that our kids learn from our words and our deeds. What we say and what we do matter. And I said then, our kids are watching. I think that's more true today than ever before. We have to ask ourselves, what are we giving to that next generation to aspire to and be inspired by? At some point, this person might have to answer it. Certainly not in his time in office. But I think all of us have to answer it too. I think we can be better than this. We can bridge some of those divides in this country. We can show people the economy and democracy could work for them. And we can do it without trying to out-Trump Trump, but actually elevating things. I think I'm a person that could do that. I so appreciate the most important dinner. It's not that steak fry in that other county. So appreciate being invited to Story County Democrats tonight. Thanks so much.
Glad to have you here. Good seeing you, my friend.